Jack, rip that door. What are you doing here? Getting you out. Here, put this on. You'll need it.
Welcome to this retrospective look at Gears of War. The game was released in November 2006 on the Xbox 360 and it became a massive hit for the console. It was first launched as a flagship title at E3 in 2005 and then later shown again in 2006. It became a massive series and I've got Arron from the team to chat with us today about it. So what was your first experiences of Gears of War? When did you first hear about it?
I first heard about it from my brother around that time where it was being shown at E3. I wasn't really paying attention. I was too busy playing Project Gotham and Perfect Art Zero, unfortunately. But yeah, my brother got me onto it, showed me the trailer, and then kept an eye on it from there. And then obviously when the Mad World trailer appeared, obviously everyone got a bit hyped for it.
It was kind of a breath of fresh air, really. The console market hadn't really been saturated too much by third-person shooters at this point, especially with the game mechanics that this had. Obviously it was renowned for having its cover-based shooting. It's kind of looked on as popularising that in the third-person shooter genre. It has many assets of the game that are focused around the cover-based shooting, notably the almost one-button does-all mechanic that it has, where you would hold A to enter in and out of cover, and you also hold A to traverse between cover and other areas to lock onto. How did you think this worked within the game?
Yeah, I felt really well. It was very smooth. It didn't break the gameplay up at all. Very smooth. And like you say, you run along, press A, ducks behind the cover, see a bit of another cover you aim at, and aim the arrow, press A again, he's there and he's shot. So yeah, I thought the movement, obviously what had gone before, it was nothing really like it. So, like I say, it was a breath of fresh air and really put the game on the map and stood out from what was around at the time, I thought.
Before we talk about other features of gameplay and things like that, so the storyline basically is the humankind have established their life on a new planet, and the indigenous population decide that that's not going to be the case. There's a cataclysm called Emergence Day where the Locust Horde try to reclaim the surface of the planet, and it's up to the Coalition to fight back the uprising of the Locust Horde. You play as the main character of Marcus Phoenix, who is voiced by John DiMaggio, who is notable for voicing the character of Bender in Futurama, and also one of the commentators in a game that I personally love called Mad World on the Wii. It's kind of based around a co-op experience. Even when you're playing in solo, you always have a kind of wingman, so to speak, of your best friend Dominic. But the game itself can be played through co-op, which was great because that brought the camaraderie of the gameplay itself to the fore.
Obviously the co-op thing was a big plus for the game. Going through it on your own, it's really good, but it just gets a bit lonely. Obviously when you have to branch off paths and stuff like that, you're relying a lot on the AI, which can be a bit dumb at times. So having the co-op feature, it was really good. It's a shame it wasn't 4-player really. Obviously with the four guys in the squad at the time, it would have been nice to have 4-player online, which would have been really good.
Because obviously the two characters that are always controlled by the computer are part of the Alpha team as well, which is Baird, who's like a wisecracking mechanic who kind of looks down on Marcus as being a bit of an imbecile. And the Coltrane, who was voiced by the office linebacker himself, Lester Spate. It's kind of like a great mix of characters. It's almost got like an A-Team vibe about it. I think it was, I remember seeing online there was like a parody trailer which was the game trailer itself, but cut to the A-Team theme tune. and it wasn't until then you realised that yes, this is exactly the kind of thing that we're looking at here. But I think one of the first playthroughs I did of it was through co-op, because the game's not very long in length. I think it's only about 8 hours, and it's all done by nice chapters and checkpoints, so you can kind of feel like you can get through it in a relatively short space of time, but with somebody, and you keep dropping in and dropping out, which was always fantastic. But apart from that, gameplay features wise, it's got a lot of like great things that not were brand new to gaming itself, but kind of used in unique ways. I thought we have like obviously the cover-based shooting, and this allows the game to employ a regenerative health system that really marries itself well to the cover-based system. People said, oh, well, it would be nice if you could have health pickups, but then it would encourage you to leave cover. And the whole point of this is more of a tactical flanking way to do combat. And I think if it come down to having health pickups, then it would kind of negate using the cover as much, and you'd feel like you would have to come out and kind of be a bit more gung-ho about it.
Yeah. I think the like you say, the regenerating health behind the cover was better than adding health pickups. I think, like you say, if you had to duck out of cover to go and pick up health or medipacks and that sort of thing, it would have just broke up the gameplay too much and taken away from what they did really well with the cover shooting and just the focus on the enemy coming at you. And yeah, you didn't have to pop your head out and I've got to go over there and get that and just keep an eye on your health, because you knew when you were dying because the screen turned red, so you just knew to get your head down, wait till that cleared, and then get yourself out, get to the next bit of cover and progress forward and push the locust back.
It also had like an active reload system, which was kind of like a nice little mini game that has obviously been employed in games subsequently, but the active reload system allowed for a faster reload, but also if you nailed it correctly and got a perfect reload, it would give your next few shots an increased firing ability and increased power. It was something that you kind of went, oh, how much am I going to use this first couple of times? But when you kind of saw the benefits for it, you paid attention to how much ammo was left in your gun, so you would never run dry, so it would automatically start the reload. To set it away itself became almost second nature, and you were always trying to nail that active reload, and it was really frustrating if you ever missed it.
It was a good mechanic they added, the active reload. I would like to see it in more games, but like you say, it gave you that extra impetus to try and time it right, charge your weapon up, give it that extra boost for a couple of seconds or a couple of shots, whatever it was. Yeah, it was like a little mini game in itself. Good mechanic. Like I say, I'd like to see it in more. Like playing Killzone lately on the PS4 and it not having that sort of thing, it can be a bit frustrating. The guns feel really slow compared to like fast gameplay really in Gears of War when you think about it. Even though they're big hulking guys, they move quite well and fast, and the active reload goes well with that, like fast pace of the game when the enemies come.
It certainly had like a risk reward to it as well, because obviously if you missed the active reload, the gun would jam, so you kind of left prone while the character sorted his gun out. And I really like that, because it wasn't just like if I didn't get it, you would just reload slower. It was like, yeah, I'll get it. I'm actually quite prone to somebody like running up to us, you know what I mean? Somebody could vault my cover and then I'd be in a lot of threat, you know what I mean? It's a lot of trouble, yeah. So going on to the weapons themselves is what you would usually expect to have an affair. You've got the machine guns, which is your Lancer, and your shotgun, and more of a like grenade launcher and things. But they've got their own special little twists, don't you think, with the addition of somewhat melee combat in this game, where your main gun, the Lancer, has a chainsaw bayonet. I mean, you can say that it's been borrowed from the likes of like Warhammer 40k and stuff. It's not unknown to have chainsaws and things like that in this post Evil Dead 2 world. But it was something that was quite controversial about the game, especially during its development period, that Microsoft weren't really that sure, and it was only Cliffy B, the game's designer, that really pushed hard for it to be included. When he showed it at E3, it was something that really wowed the audiences, including the head of Microsoft himself, Bill Gates, who pretty much said that it was his favourite part of the game demo. He was right. I mean, it was something that made the game quite iconic when it came out, isn't it?
If you mention Gears of War to people, they always mention the chainsaw bayonet.
Yeah.
That is the first thing you think of. So it did its job.
And it definitely adds to give the game like a very, very visceral edge, because, you know, what would this game be without its extreme violence, really? There's another weapon in the game that I think's quite worth mentioning, which is the Hammer of Dawn, which is only really used sparingly throughout the game. It's almost like Smart Bomb, isn't it? But it's only really used on the bosses. It comes into play much more on the multiplayer, which we'll talk about a bit later on. Talking about obviously how we dispatch of the enemies, we'll go on to talk about the enemies themselves. So you're battling against the Locust Horde, who a lot of their ground troops pretty much almost are a reflection of you themselves. You know, the ground troops, you know, these big hulking beasts, and kind of the same armor as what you're wearing, which I always thought was quite odd. It feels like they're just reskins of the normal troop characters that you're fighting alongside.
Yeah, very, very similar.
Yeah.
Size and armor.
Yeah, and they have similar weaponry and stuff out, but then you've also got a complement of boss characters and more standout creatures, such as the Theron Guard, who have these explosive bone arrows that appear later on in the game. They're quite cool. And General Ram, who is the head of the Locust Horde, which you fight as a final boss in the game. Apart from those characters, you have certain distinct enemies and bosses, notably the Berserker, who you have to change your gameplay style up slightly to combat this enemy. She can't see you, so if you make too much noise when you're around her or you're too close, she can smell you. And it introduces different ways to traverse areas. You have to get round her to get her outside, so you can take it down with the Hammer of Dawn, which is, I say, like this smart bomb weaponry, because your normal artillery really won't have much effect on it. And it was quite a nice introduction, I think, to the game, that you're doing all this stop and pop, run and gun combat, and then you have to change it up and be a bit more like try and force her to follow you while also keeping out of her way, because if she gets a hold of you, she will just destroy you in one hit. How did you think about that change up in gameplay?
Like I say, it slowed it down a little bit. Change the pace, change the tone. I think it made the game feel a bit more horror survival, just for that little moment where you have, obviously she's stalking you through the depths of this mansion library thing, and you're trying to get her to follow you, which you don't really want her to follow you, because one hit and you're dead, but you obviously have to use her strengths to get yourself out of this place. So yeah, the Berserker character itself is very imposing, absolutely huge. Like I say, one hit, you're dead. Reminds me very much of Mr. X from Resi 2, which is very popular at the moment. Thought it was a good change up. Made a little bit stealthy, a bit of survival horror. So yeah, it was good from what you were doing before.
Funny you said the survival horror thing, because Cliffy B has gone on record to say that, you know, Resident Evil 4 was a massive influence on the game.
Yeah, you can see it, especially in that part of the game. You can see why.
Yeah, because I think what he wanted to do is marry what was considered as the traditional science fiction action blockbuster with the horror element, and I think he managed to marry things quite successfully, and I think you can see a lot of influences from a lot of popular culture in this game. You know, I mean, we've already mentioned like the A-Team and stuff like that, and you know, the science fiction action films, but there's also, like, with some of the characters and the setting of the game itself, you kind of get this Starship Troopers vibe about it, especially with the Coalition themselves, where the Coalition by a lot of people is seen as like a fascist organisation, and you know, the way that some of the characters are shown, it's very much like that Starship Troopers-esque vibe you get from it. Notably, another influence you can easily point to is Pitch Black, where there's certain sections of the game where you can't go into the darkness, and you've got to look for explosive barrels to light your way through different areas, because if you step into the darkness, there's a creature called the Krill, and they're almost like these little bats that will swoop down on you and tear you to pieces, you know. And it's definitely a nod to films like Pitch Black. Yeah, no, obviously I've never seen Pitch Black myself, shame I know, but yeah, like you say, the Krill bit, again, it went a bit survival horror, slowed the game down, made you think about what you were doing, pick your way through the level. Like I say, if you stepped into the darkness, you were mincemeat basically by the Krill, like flying piranhas really. So yeah, that was a good enemy and good part of the game. Slowed it down a bit before you went into obviously the next part that we'll get to with the vehicle. But yeah, I enjoyed the Krill, good enemy. Shame they didn't put them into the multiplayer as like a little bonus when you unlock the packages on Call of Duty. That'd have been a good little thing, have them running around the multiplayer levels. So how did you feel about the vehicle section? Because I know this is something that's put a lot of people off subsequently in the way when they discuss it.
So yeah, I didn't mind the vehicle bit. Obviously, I'm into my cars and stuff, so having a vehicle in a game, I'm all for that. But it didn't take away from the experience, in my eyes anyway. I thought it was implemented well. The vehicle design was good. It fitted in with the way the world looked and the way the gears looked. So yeah, obviously the vehicle section, as you going from one place to another, and you're in this like tank thing with a UV light on it, which kills the Krill, but obviously the caveat to that is that you had to stop the tank before you could use it, which give you this like the risk reward thing. Do I push forward, or do I stop and use the gun and take some out then move? So yeah, I thought it was yeah, it's good. I liked it. I don't see what the big deal was. People kicked up a bit of fuss about it, but no, not for me. I thought it was right in place.
Moving on to the game from a visual standpoint, when it was getting developed, they were going for this a term that the coin called destroyed beauty. They took influence from London architecture, and I think there's definitely a touch of Roman architecture in this game, but it was from a very much of a post-apocalyptic front, like after the final cataclysm, because pretty much the humans, to save what's left of humanity, pretty much destroy the planet in a last-ditch attempt to get rid of the locust horde. So everything, all the civilization that was there is now a ruin. It gives the game this slightly, this war-torn look and quite a like nuclear fallout vibe to it, doesn't it? Where it's got like this heavy dust cloud, brown texture to the game. It's something that has been criticised like subsequently, like later on, as people look back at it now and think that this is a game that looks incredibly brown. It was one of the games that pioneered the Unreal Engine 3, and I think it still holds up today, but it's definitely got that darkened visuals. I mean, how did you find them at the time? Did you think it was over dowdy, or? No,
I didn't at all, until obviously you see it mentioned online. I might have seen people moaning, oh, it's very brown, very dark here, there's no green. But like you say, the way the world designed, very Roman looking, lots of statues, lots of big Colosseum looking buildings, pillars, what have you, very industrial looking, so I can't imagine there's going to be too much vegetation around. So the colours they use for the buildings and obviously the scorched sky and the ruined world, it's not going to have any growth going on because they've burnt everything.
Yeah,
destroyed everything. So what do people expect?
I personally think that it could have done with a more vibrant colour palette in sections, because I think that sometimes that you can get to the point where the characters themselves don't stand out enough. They could have done it with just a bit more of a pop to them. Nothing that would have taken away from the aesthetic that they would try to go with, but that it would make the game look a bit more attractive. I think that the graphics themselves look absolutely incredible, and that in a lot of ways they still stand up today. But there's just something that subsequently later on in the game they still managed to keep that, but added more of a variety to the colour palette, which I thought was a bit of a welcome addition.
They went a long way to address those quips about the first one in the Ultimate Edition on the Xbox One. You can see they've fleshed out the textures and the gears, the lights on the RAM stand out more, so they obviously separate themselves from the dark background. So yeah, I think obviously if you played the Ultimate Edition, it just does help with the visuals a lot.
It did have quite varied locations throughout the game. I mean, you've got the city there where you start, like we've discussed, the Roman and London inspired architecture, and then you go into like a subterranean area where you've taken the fight to the Locust Horde. As dark as it is, it's kind of got like highlights where the a lava element to the core of the planet Sierra gives it that more vibrant look, I suppose, down there. But I think it could have been implemented in different areas to add nice lighting effects and things. And then you go to the Phoenix Mansion, which is where they could have introduced a bit more colour into there to make it a bit more varied. And then finally an industrial factory. So it's they've gone for very much these darkened areas, I think, to maybe it disguises some of the drawbacks that they had in the programming at times. If they kept it very dark, then you can, in places quite close, then they could keep the graphics from at a high texture level, but save on
definitely.
Processing power and things. And maybe that was a way they looked at it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, what I found, especially sometimes even now playing Unreal Engine games, there's quite a lot of texture popping still, even on say Arkham Knight, and that's only a few years old, and that still suffers from it. So maybe that was a reason for keeping a lot of it dark and the texture's a bit bland, so you took your eye off it a bit more.
Moving on to the soundtrack, the score written by Kevin Siebel, if I've pronounced that right. He's gone for a very almost militaristic score with this one, hasn't he? But given it kind of a triumphant score, but also something with a lot of menace. And I think it really, really works well. It gets you pumped for taking the fight to the Locust, but it doesn't give you a sense of empowerment either. You know what I mean? It makes you know that you're ready for the fight, but it's also quite intrepid, and you're fighting insurmountable odds.
It builds up the tension where it needs to, like a good soundtrack should. And then obviously when the fight's going on, the music's pumping, getting you pumped, getting the soldiers pumped.
Yeah.
And then when it slows it down, you know when a fight's over. It has a nice little key change. You know the fight's done. You know you can relax for a little bit. And then when the locusts are coming again, it lets you know through an audio cue, which is always nice.
Yeah, I think it handles quite some nice audio cues in this game. You know, it's got certain things that stick with the player quite a bit during the thing. Like you said, there's like almost like a guitar riff when you know you've killed the last enemy in a section.
Yeah,
and then there's kind of like almost like a tolling of a bell when you hit a new objective, isn't it? And it's like it's these like little cues that you know you've hit certain things that you don't have to necessarily. It becomes entrenched in what you're doing without having to be overbearing, you know what I mean? It's like oh well, you don't have to have like constant chatter going on, you must go and do this now, or you must go and do this now, or do you know what I mean? Or you have to have a cutscene for the end of a fight or anything. It's just it kind of handled nicely within the music cues, I think. Yeah,
it keeps the game flowing. Like I say, no silly cutscenes at the end of fights to move you on to the next bit. You just know you're done, ready to keep moving forward.
And other things apart from the audio as well, is there's a lot of nice chatter between the characters. I think the scripts are well written from not only from a gameplay standpoint where it keeps the story flow and it doesn't over-egg the pudding somewhat with the plot, but what it does really nice is the character development through dialogue. The characters don't get on all the time, they kind of like argue amongst themselves and stuff, but you've got like a lot of character development in that. You find out about Dominic's wife that he's struggling to find. You find out that Marcus Phoenix, the main character that you play as, has been a disgraced soldier at some point, and you find out about Coltrane's thrashball career. And also the Baird feels like he should be at a higher rank than he is in the coalition. So, but all that comes and all of that isn't like done through cutscenes and stuff like that. It's all done through dialogue between the characters themselves. And I always thought that was really good. And for a game that's pretty much just that balls to the wall action game, it does its character development like really subtly and really well. And it adds that you can actually identify with the characters, even though. They kind of, in some ways, if you look at them, they just look like faceless grunts. There's nothing particularly special about them. But personality-wise, it's something that really shines.
They obviously build out their personality, build out their characters, I suppose, make you feel for these guys and what they're going through. And obviously Dom looking for his wife, and he mentions it here and there. And then you got Baird with his sarky comments, always trying to undermine Marcus as you walk through the levels and the cutscenes. So yeah, there's a lot of audio in it, and it's not unnecessary. It's at the right times, the right spots, and the right things are said just to keep you focused really on what's going on. Not say if you compare it to like say Call of Duty, where there's not really a lot of talking, it's just bang 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 bang, move forward, bang bang bang. Mm-hmm. It's nice just to give these characters some personality and find out about Marcus and Dom's bromance.
Very much so. Moving on to like final thoughts of the game, just quickly touch on the multiplayer, which wasn't really a massive feature of the first game. It's certainly something that came into the fore on later games in the series, what with the Horde Mode and more capture the flag domination levels where you've got to hold parts of the map. But in this first title, it was kind of mostly just down to deathmatch or execution. Yeah. Where you had to kill one member of the team, and it was always based on 4-on-4 deathmatch mechanic, where you would play two factions of 4.
I never spent a lot of time on the multiplayer, if I'm honest. Mm-hmm. More because, I don't know, obviously Xbox Live was a new thing for me. I didn't have an original Xbox until late on, so I didn't really dabble in online. Yeah. And it just, I don't know, it didn't really grab me. The multiplayer wasn't what I played of it. I didn't find it that good, to be honest. It felt very lumbered and very slow compared to what you'd played, say on PC, like Counter-Strike. It's very slow compared to that. I think it took a lot of practice to be good at it. Obviously, there's a lot of wall bouncing going on, a lot of close killing. So yeah, I think obviously in the later games they fleshed out with the Horde Mode and stuff, which was very good. But the first game, I think multiplayer was a bit lacking for me.
I did play a lot of the co-op online. I think I subsequently played a lot more multiplayer in the games that preceded this. Definitely in Gears of War 2 and 3 played a hell of a lot of multiplayer, mostly the Horde Mode with friends, and it was a great way to spend a Saturday night for me with my friends and a couple of beers. But in terms of the game itself, how do you think it stands up today?
I think if you look at it, it was a system seller for the 360. It was a reason to own it. Like GoldenEye was a reason to own the N64 at the time. So just stand out. If you talk about the best games on the 360, Gears will be probably almost at the top of the list, I'd say.
I think it's very much one of the most significant titles in that generations of consoles.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's definitely an iconic game for not only but the 360, but also against all the competition that was out there. Like you say, it made the Xbox 360 very much a must-have console for a lot of people.
That killer app they wanted, and they got it. Mm-hmm. They needed it, really.
Yeah.
Because over the Halo, they didn't really have anything else.
Yeah, I think this one, I may be foolish to say, but I think this one probably brought a lot more to the table than the Halo games on the 360, because it felt so fresh. I mean, subsequently now, the game. I mean, the proof is that how many games that preceded this it took a lot of influence from it as well. Even 50 Cent got his own cover-based shooter. If to anybody who doesn't know that, 50 Cent Blood on the Sand, where 50 Cent and the G Unit decide to take on the whole of the Middle East.
Of course.
Which sounds I don't know if it really ages well, but it's one of these guilty pleasures, I think, for the 7th generation consoles. It shouldn't be ignored, if nothing else, but for the 50 cent swear button that you get on your pad. But definitely had massive amount of influence from Gears of War. But the game mechanics themselves, they didn't really pioneer a lot of things, but it kind of got everything right in this soup of great ideas and generally made like a fantastic game out of them. I think it stands up today. Playing it recently, I really think that there is still a lot to offer. I think it's a more focused experience in a lot of ways than the subsequent titles that came out, and definitely one that, from a plot standpoint, for just a good old big budget blockbuster of a game, I think it really is worth a second look if you haven't played it for a while.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, like I say, it's playing it recently again. Even on the 360, the gameplay hasn't aged, the control scheme hasn't aged. I dare say the visuals haven't aged at all. And then obviously, if you can't play it on the 360, you've got the Xbox One version, which looks fantastic and still plays exactly the same. So yeah, it's still a banger.
Okay, that's fantastic. I think we'll draw this to a conclusion, and stay tuned for more retrospective looks from the team at Maximum Power Up.